Have you ever checked into a hotel room and felt like something was watching you, though you were utterly alone? Like the air itself carried a secret, and every shadow hid a story waiting to unfold. Imagine staying in a room where the clock seems to stop, where your reflection moves on its own, and where by morning guests simply disappear without a trace. Room 313 is one such place. The stories whispered among travelers speak of vanished visitors, abandoned belongings, and strange recordings that make you question reality itself. It all starts like any ordinary stay. A tired traveler arrives late in the evening, suitcase in hand, eager to rest. The lobby is quiet. The receptionist polite but distant, handing over a brass key with the number 313 engraved cool and heavy in your palm. The corridor leading to that door stretches endlessly, lit by dim flickering lights, the wallpaper peeling slightly as if decades of secrets cling to it. I remember the first time I heard about room 300. It was from a friend who worked at the front desk of an old hotel on the outskirts of a quiet town. He told me that on some nights, guests who checked into that room never checked out. No phone calls, no messages, just an eerie silence that replaced their presence. Their personal effects, wallets, phones, sometimes even clothes were left behind, scattered as if the owners vanished mid-movement. Staff who tried to investigate found only cold air and the faint sound of static from an old tape recorder placed in the corner of the room. Curiosity, or maybe a kind of foolish fascination, drew me there. When I booked a stay, I expected a normal hotel experience, a soft bed, a shower, maybe a decent night's sleep. But as I stepped into room 313, a subtle shift happened. The air was heavier, the silence louder. The usual hum of city noise was absent. Instead, there was a quiet static, almost like the world beyond that door didn't exist anymore. The room itself was unremarkable at first glance. A simple bed, a nightstand, an old-fashioned radio that looked out of place in the 21st century. But when I touched the radio, the static intensified, and faint voices whispered through the crackling noise. The bedspread felt unnaturally cold, and the mirror hanging opposite the door reflected the room perfectly, except when it didn't. Sometimes the reflection lagged behind, or I would see a shadow pass behind me that wasn't really there. Yet everything seemed so normal. The hotel felt safe, the kind of place you'd expect to find weary business travelers or families passing through. No glaring signs of danger, just an odd, lingering feeling that this room was different, that it was waiting for something or someone. Each night I stayed, the room played tricks on my mind. Familiar sounds warped into whispers. Footsteps echoed in hallways that led nowhere, and the tape recorder on the shelf occasionally sputtered to life capturing snippets of conversations I never participated in. The belongings of previous guests remained untouched, but out-of-place books open to pages about parallel worlds, photographs of strangers smiling, but with eyes that seemed too hollow, letters folded neatly but never mailed. I asked around discreetly. The hotel staff avoided the topic or spoke in hushed tones about guests who come and go in strange ways. One older housekeeper claimed she had cleaned the room for decades, and every so often items would appear or vanish without explanation. She warned me never to stay past midnight if I valued my sanity. What really unsettled me was how time behaved there. Clocks in the room never matched the ones in the lobby, sometimes running too fast, sometimes stopping completely. Days and nights blurred, and I found myself unsure if I was awake or dreaming. The outside world felt distant, almost unreachable, but still, the room's pull was undeniable. There was a strange comfort in its familiarity, even as dread seeped into the corners of my mind. I realized this place was not just a room. It was a threshold, a thin veil between the world I knew and something else entirely. Something that swallowed guests whole, leaving behind only silence and unanswered questions. And so my story begins, in room 313, where the ordinary bends into the uncanny, and the line between reality and nightmare fades under the weight of forgotten memories and unseen forces. The first few nights passed quietly enough, or so I thought. Each morning I woke with the lingering feeling that something had shifted while I slept. The hotel seemed normal enough during the day. Guests bustling through the lobby, the scent of fresh coffee in the air, the gentle hum of everyday life. But room 313 held its own rhythm, one I couldn't quite understand. On the third night, I noticed it. A faint knock on the door just once, right at 3 a.m. The kind of knock that sends a chill down your spine. Not loud, but deliberate. I froze, staring at the door through the peephole, expecting to see a shadow or a face, but there was nothing. No one in the hallway, just silence. I opened the door slowly, heart pounding, but the corridor was empty, the dim lights flickering as if in response to my unease. That night, sleep was elusive. I kept hearing soft, indecipherable whispers coming from the old radio. I tried turning it off, but the static only grew louder. And then I realized those whispers weren't random. They sounded like voices calling names. Names I didn't recognize, yet they were spoken with urgency, almost pleading. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. The next day, driven by a restless curiosity, I searched through the belongings left by previous guests. Among a few scattered items, I found an old diary, worn and fragile, hidden beneath a loose floorboard. The last entry caught my eye. Immediately it was dated, just a week before my stay, and eerily enough, It mentioned me by name. I don't know how to say this, but the room isn't what it seems, the diary warned. Each night, the walls whisper secrets and time bends like a broken clock. I'm scared I won't leave. If you find this, don't trust your reflection and never ever answer the knock. My pulse quickened as I read those words. Was this some cruel prank or a genuine cry for help from someone trapped in a nightmare? That night, I couldn't help but keep the diary beside me as I lay on the bed, the shadows in the corners seeming to grow longer, almost reaching out. Then came the dreams, if they could be called that. I saw people trapped in endless hallways, doors closing just as they tried to escape, faces blurred, voices muffled like echoes of those who vanished without a trace. And always the knock at 3 a.m., a haunting reminder of the thin line between waking and sleep. One night I caught movement in the mirror. It wasn't my reflection. Something darker, something twisted just behind the glass, staring back at me with hollow eyes. I blinked and it was gone, but the feeling lingered, a cold weight pressing against my chest. I wondered if the room was trying to tell me something or warning me to leave before it was too late. Still, the hotel's calm facade during the day was deceptive. I noticed other guests avoiding room 313, crossing the lobby, quickly whispering behind closed doors. Staff glanced nervously when I asked about the room, but their eyes held fear rather than answers. The deeper I dug, the more I realized this was no ordinary hotel, and room 313 was far from an ordinary space. It was a place where reality frayed, where time twisted, and where those who stayed risked losing more than just sleep. They risked vanishing altogether, swallowed by a dimension that blurred the line between life and something else. That's when I understood room 313 wasn't just a room. It was a trap, a gateway, and a mystery that defied explanation. And I was right in the middle of it. As the nights grew longer, the strange occurrences in room 313 became impossible to ignore. I started noticing a pattern, little rules that seemed to govern the rooms. Eerie behavior rules that no one had warned me about, but that were written in the silence between shadows. One of the first rules I discovered was about the mirror. I learned the hard way that looking into it after 2 a.m. was dangerous. One night, curiosity got the better of me. The clock had just struck 2, and the room was bathed in the pale glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. I stared into the mirror, expecting my own reflection, but instead I saw a scene playing out behind me. Figure standing just out of reach, its face obscured by darkness. Frozen, I watched as the figure's mouth moved, whispering words I couldn't hear. When I finally tore my eyes away, the room felt colder, heavier, like I had broken an unspoken law. From then on, I never dared meet the mirror's gaze past that hour. Another chilling discovery was about sleep. Every night, I experimented by changing where I slept in the room. The bed was a simple twin with a top bunk folded against the wall, as if waiting for someone else. On the nights I slept on the bottom bunk, an odd feature for a single guest, the top bunk creaked and groaned as if someone invisible lay there. I heard soft crying, two quiet sobs that echoed in the stillness. But when I looked up, the bunk was empty. The room seemed alive with the memories of past occupants. I found old notes tucked beneath the mattress, scribbled warnings like, "Don't trust the silence," and "The walls listen." One note told of a child gagged and hidden away in this very hotel decades ago, trapped in a forgotten room that had since been sealed off. Could room 313 be linked to that tragedy? I reached out to the hotel's archives, digging through dusty records, and uncovered a grim past. Years ago, a child went missing from the hotel, secret quickly buried by the management. The child's name was never spoken, but the room associated with the disappearance was rumored to be room 313. Some believed the child's spirit lingered bound to the room, twisting reality as a way to communicate, or worse, to trap others like me. One night, the room grew colder than ever before. The radio sputtered to life on its own, crackling with voices that seemed to argue, pleading for release. The shadows on the walls lengthened and distorted, forming shapes that resembled hands reaching out, desperate to grab hold. I felt trapped in a waking nightmare, caught between two worlds. The room's grip tightened, and I realized this wasn't just a haunted hotel room. It was a living, breathing entity with rules that dictated who stayed and who vanished. The fear became real, gnawing at my sanity. Every decision felt like a gamble. Look at the mirror or don't answer the knock or ignore it. Sleep on the bed or avoid it altogether. Breaking these rules seemed to invite something closer, something I couldn't see but could feel crawling beneath my skin. Room 313 was no longer just a place to sleep. It was a test, a trap, and maybe even a punishment. And as the line between my reality and whatever else existed there blurred, I knew I was running out of time to understand its secrets or risk becoming another guest who vanished without a trace. That final night began like any other, but the air inside room 313 was thick, charged with something I couldn't explain. Like the room itself was holding its breath. I felt an urge to break the rules that had kept me barely safe so far. I couldn't ignore the knocking anymore, the voices, the shadow behind the mirror. I needed answers. Or maybe I just wanted to see if I could escape the grip of this place before it swallowed me whole. As the clock struck 3, the knock came again. This time, it was louder, insistent, urgent. My hand trembled as I reached for the door handle. Opening it revealed nothing but the dim, empty hallway. Yet just beyond the threshold, I saw something crawling across the floor. At first, it looked like a doll, the one I'd seen placed next to my bed each morning. But this was wrong. It moved. I stared in disbelief as the doll's glassy eyes fixed on me, its tiny limbs pulling it forward with unnatural determination. I tried to shut the door, but it slipped inside before I could close it. Panic surged through me. Turning back into the room, I saw the radio crackling wildly, the whispers growing into desperate screams. The mirror rippled like disturbed water, and from it stepped a figure, faint at first, then clearer. A child, gagged and pale eyes hollow, but burning with fury. I stumbled back, heart hammering, but the figure reached out, fingers brushing my cheek coldly. Suddenly, the ceiling above me seemed to distort, and in the wavering light, I saw carved words, deep and jagged, as if etched with fingernails. "Don't sleep when I am awake." The room trembled, as if waking from a long slumber. I understood then that breaking the rules wasn't just reckless, it was dangerous. The child, the vanished guests, the endless whispers, they were all bound by the same terrifying truth. This room was alive, a sentient prison that demanded obedience or else. I grabbed the diary, the notes, everything I could, desperate to find a way out. But the walls closed in, the door slammed shut, and the last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was the doll crawling closer, a twisted smile spreading across its cracked face. Room 313 had claimed another soul, but whether I disappeared forever or merely became part of its endless story, I couldn't say. So if you ever find yourself given a key to room 313, remember the ordinary can turn monstrous, reflections can lie, and sometimes the most familiar place is the one that traps you beyond escape. Sleep well.